Hello everyone. It is February 25. It is episode 11 of the Treasure Inside Edition, and I am joined again by the management. How you doing, the management?
Hello everyone. Doing great in sunny Florida.
That's great. I'm a real part-timer here. Sorry we didn't get an episode out last week, but we're back this week. Seems like we're on a bit of a every 2-week schedule, but we're back on track. We'll have one every week from now on.
Promise.
So it's been, of course, it's always been a big week in this Treasure Inside, but anything be going on with you, management, this week, either with this Treasure Inside related or something else?
You know, I have really just been circling at like the 50,000 foot view on the Appalachian footpath. I've got a lot of theories going on there, and I can't really ever nail anything down. A couple weeks ago, I did a YouTube video. The management is my handle on there as well. And I basically, do you remember that show, Drunk History?
Yes.
So I basically did a wine bottle challenge where I had to come up with a solve from start to finish, all during the course of drinking a wine bottle. So I did like a before, sober, after, mildly buzzed.
But that's mildly buzzed off one bottle of wine?
Mildly buzzed. I didn't get to finish the whole thing. It was like 3 glasses.
That's still a lot. I'm proud of you. I think I would be a little more than slightly buzzed after that. But that's great.
I live in Florida, so drinking is a part-time job here.
Okay, well, I guess people can check that out on your YouTube channel. It sounds very intriguing. I've not seen it. I'm going to have to check it out. So, I mean, there's been a lot going on in the There's Treasure Inside world. For me, I'm still stuck on the past and future box. I know I've got a problem. I've got an addiction. I can't move off the past and future box. And I think for me, the thesaurus has become my best friend. I'm at the level now where I'm going through almost every word in the chapter and trying to figure out different ways in which he's trying to tell us something in terms of twisting the words around. And I've got a few theories. I'm not ready to share them just quite yet, but I've been working on a number of things, getting me into all sorts of hobbies that I never would have before.
That's interesting. And I know we have guests tonight that planned on talking about allegory and etymology a lot.
Yes, we're going to have Triscuit and Indy on tonight. Looking forward to speaking to them in a little bit. But we should cover a few things off from last time. So our weekly treasure hunt token hunt, I want to go through this. For those listeners who were listening last time, we talked about how Jim Wyland had won the first 2 treasure hunt token hunts. And our code for last week was Beat Jim. Well, it turns out someone did beat Jim.
Sorry, Jim. You couldn't stay on the throne forever.
Yeah, so it was Preheated Dragon on X. Took it down last week. Treasure Hunt 214. And for those that were looking for a solution, it was actually, for me, a lot simpler than the previous weeks. It was a picture of polar bears taking pictures of each other. And if you just Google camera polar bear, you'll find that there's a live feed of polar bears at a place called Conrad Krebs. And that's what was represented by the dashes on the bottom of the treasure map. And that was the solution. So it was very quick this week that someone picked that up for $30. But we're going to have another treasure hunt this week. Let's do another $30. We'll put the link in the show notes. And we have to come up with a code as well for our listeners. What's the code going to be this week, do you think?
The code this week, we had Beat Jim last week. We've got the dragon. Man, let's stick with something Treasure Inside themed, and let's go with confirmation bias, just to remind everybody to be aware of that.
Okay, that's good. And your confirmation bias hunt in Philadelphia will play well.
Yes.
So, confirmation
it didn't work out.
It didn't, but maybe not yet. Don't shoot it down just yet.
True.
Confirmation bias, 2 words this time, all lowercase. That'll be our code. The solution will be somewhere on the internet, and go to treasurehunttoken.com to find out more on how to play these. By the way, there's treasure hunt token hunts out there on the same website. You just have to have a certain amount of treasure hunt tokens. So for those who are into crypto, you can find the contract on the website. for those who are not, we'll put up a video of how you can actually buy treasure hunt tokens to access more hunts on the website.
So do you have to pay for the hunts with the treasure hunt token, or do you just have the coin and that makes you eligible?
Well, for the ones we're doing on the show, they're absolutely free. You don't have to have any treasure hunt token. But for other ones that are on the website, you buy some treasure hunt token. That gets you membership essentially to be able to access different hunts. But it's worth something. It's not like you pay the money and it's gone. You actually hold treasure hunt token in your account and you can sell them again at any point. But you're not actually just spending the money and it's gone. You will actually own treasure hunt token in your wallet.
Oh, so it's not like Final Jeopardy where you wager so much and then you lose it. Once you buy it, you've got it forever.
Yes, unless you choose to sell it. You could sell it if you want.
Right.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so we've got a big interview this week with 2 people. I'm not sure we've attempted to have 4 people talk at one time. Maybe we did once before. So I think we should bring in Indy and Triscuit now and have a chat to them.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited to hear what they have to say.
Well, welcome. We're bringing in Triscuit and Indy, what I call the brains of the operation so far. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Really excited.
Indy, which voice are you?
Which voice am I?
That's you.
OGers from the Fen Chase would know me as Chasing Indy. I used to have my own podcast, and I had some, wild, controversial connections throughout the 5-year hiatus of the chase.
Oh, I didn't know anything about that. And Triscuit, you're pretty new to treasure hunting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is TTI is the first time I got involved in, so it's all new to me just these past few months.
So you're not bitter at all. You're like coming with fresh eyes and fresh enthusiasm.
Yeah, absolutely. But going into it, I knew that there's a lot of bitterness that I could get ensnared by. So I'm prepared for it. Don't worry.
That's the thing. So I met both of you at the conference, I should say, in person. It was great to hang out with you both. But I did notice it was almost like there were 2 groups. One of people who had been through the forest fen hunt and were kind of beaten down. And then there were the other people that are coming that were new to it that were kind of fresh-faced. Did you get that feeling as well?
I did a little bit, yeah. Although it seemed 50-50, like some people were beat down. But there's like another group of people they were just so excited to be there.
That's true.
You could see it in their eyes and the way they walk around. Maybe it's the alcohol. Who knows?
Probably was. Probably a good part of it. So you guys are both doing There's Treasure Inside and are working through the book, right?
Yep, that's correct.
And when I was speaking to you, I found it very interesting that when I asked people what part of the book are you working on, most people say one of the 4 smaller boxes. And when I asked you 2 who are working together, correct? You were saying that you're going after the lion's share, which I thought was a very arrogant move, but a nice type of arrogant. I was very impressed.
A lot of confidence to take that path where knowing that it's not all isolated like the smaller boxes.
Well, I could definitely say the confidence stems from previous experience in the chase with Forrest Fenn and his treasure hunt. You have to understand and know contentment and confidence to find the right track.
And so Triscuit, Indy was mentioning that you're more of the scientific side, which I think is a really great balance. I think you 2 probably do complement each other very well. What do you use from the scientific standpoint to approach this hunt?
So that's there's a couple of different factors in that. So I come from both a physics and a computer science background. So I'm a little drawn to the things he mentions that include like space travel or Bitcoin and stuff like that. Although, admittingly, I'm more of a sucker for stories. So I've always paid more attention to the stories than the scientific aspects of everything.
What are some of the tools that you've used to try and figure this out?
So I have a lot. I think the most clear one that everyone's been using is just a general generative AI program like ChatGPT, right? I assume you guys have been using that quite a lot too, right?
I've used it a lot, but the thing is, and I've come to understand this more and more with ChatGPT, it just makes things up all the time. People call it hallucinations. Hallucinations just make things up. And so I was thinking at one point, how can I trust anything it's saying? And then I realized just after it says something, every time I just say, are you sure? And most of the time it's like, no, you're right, I'm not sure. Actually, it's this. So I'm losing faith a little bit in ChatGPT.
Well, I actually have a theory on that.
Yeah, go on.
So JCB actually entailed that, he already foreshadowed, or he basically foresaw people trying to use this as a backdoor. And he stated that there is an element that AI lacks. It might be able to be developed later on in the future, but it currently lacks an element that he believes will prevent you from using that tool to solve it. So in theory, I believe if you can figure out that element, you already have your beginning thread.
And there's not just one, there's many. Well, many things that AI lacks the ability to do.
What's confusing with ChatGPT is a lot of people think that it's like going to the internet and finding this information when it's actually based on outdated data and data that is fed to it. So a lot of the times if you're asking questions, then it's getting old information anyway. So it's not going to be up to date and it's not going to know anything about there's treasure inside. I had personally been working on a custom GPT for Forrest Finn just as a new treasure hunter and not knowing all the history. I have all these questions that I wanted to relate back and forth. So I've been kind of trying to build a repository where I give it all the data that it needs, but it by no means, if I ask like the most basic Forrest Finn questions, it gives me wrong answers all the time. And I'm not like Indy, who's been doing this for years and knows all the ins and outs of it. So with ChatGPT being the obvious option, what other GPT models do you suggest using?
So I don't actually suggest using any other ones. In fact, I would say it's good to take a break from it and try to figure out, I guess, what your own solve is supposed to be, right? Because I think one of the biggest problems with ChatGPT is quite literally confirmation bias. It has a tendency to want to take elements and fit it into its own solution, and it builds on its previous information in a way that presents a sort of finished conclusion of what you were previously talking about. So if you're actually trying to lead it away from something towards something that you want, what could actually be happening is that you might be pushing it backwards in a sense. You might be pushing it away from a correct solve.
Well, let's think of an example, right? So what I've been doing is trying to figure out how 1980s games fits into the solution. So I've been saying things like, can you tell me where a 15 by 20 grid would show up in 80s games? Are you suggesting that it will try and make up or like think of ways on where it's linked to 1980s games that doesn't really exist?
I mean, sometimes it can, but also I do think that's actually one of the good use cases. If you're doing research on something, that's where it shines. So if you're trying to like dig a little bit deeper on, say, a location to learn the history of it, or a person or an item or something like that, it shines in its ability to kind of dig up that information and summarize it for you. But as soon as you start presenting it with, hey, can you find me something that's the combination of Jackie Onassis and emeralds and Pokemon, it's not going to know what to do with that information, and it's going to give you things that will lead you astray. And another thing to mention is that its ability to solve anything cryptographic or anything with image rendering is very poor. Specifically, I can talk about how he has a whole chapter on perspective, for example. So when you feed an image to AI, it's going to convert everything to bits, right? And when it does that, it doesn't quite necessarily have things like depth perception. It's trying to look for specific patterns in that image, and it's going to lack things like depth perception or creativity of seeing things from a different angle, for example.
And Indy, I'm assuming you are not using a whole bunch of ChatGPT, but
oh no, my methodology is quite simple: allegorical representations and etymology.
Well, let's explain that. Allegorical representations means?
So allegories are just other ways people can use different stories to represent either a topic, an emotion, or a theme, even a timeline. So what I've started to pick up with JCB is I don't think people are realizing how much of an influence Forrest Fenn and the chase was on him. And even though, let's say, he's using Ready Player One, it does not differ from what the original blueprint was with the chase. So he's just finding his allegorical representation to mimic what Fenn did in his blueprint. Prime example, we could talk about, again, Ready Player One. Ready Player One has Halliday. Halliday was a rambunctious, quintrillionaire. Like, he had an infinite amount of money, and he wanted to set apart, the rich from the poor and give them an opportunity to make something of themselves by using what they loved most, which was their imagination. That's the same thing Fenn did. So once you understand allegorical representations, and I mean, JCB even uses the term allegories in the book, you could start to figure out the fractals of what he's trying to put together for you. And then another really strong element is etymology. Etymology is completely differentiated from a definition. Etymology is how you figure out how to use a word's proper context by its origin. And again, Fenn taught me that as well. So if you're reading a book and you come across something you don't understand, like a word or a phrase, if you break it down etymologically, it could tell you exactly how to use it in its proper context. And it starts to create what I would say like a maze. You've got a labyrinth. And for anyone that understands, clue, ball of string, that is one of the oldest terms for the methodology to connect point A to point B. So, you got the Minotaur, you've got Greek mythology, and how there was a string that was left in the labyrinth for him to get out. That's what Fenn did, and that's what JCB is doing. You figure out your clue on where to start, and it takes you from point A to point B. And etymology helps you unravel that thread.
So what you're saying is, like, each one of the chapters, for example, is a story. And I guess you're suggesting it's an allegory for something else.
Yes.
It's a story referring to something else. Are you suggesting, though, that the something else's bind together to make a cohesive story?
Yes. So the best way I could say it without giving too much away is, prime example, people are trying to figure out the clues for his children's book, Our Unbreakable Thread.
Yes.
Well, in my personal opinion, the most blatant and obvious clue is the thread itself. You have to find the thread in the story and start pulling to figure out how to get out of the labyrinth.
I'd like to interject with something too and say that, I think John mentioned that it's one of those clues that you're not really going to know until you're already looking for it, right?
The clue in Our Unbreakable Thread is the one you wouldn't recognize?
Yeah, correct. So I think something I've noticed is that a lot of searchers are kind of trying to dive right in, which there's nothing inherently wrong with, but I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to slow down and kind of evaluate and take things one step at a time, rather than trying to draw conclusions out of things that you might not be ready for.
I was going to say, if you're looking at the how to read this book section that comes after the introduction, JCB even says from time to time, some historical fictional flair is added for storytelling effect. And then he also says, on occasion, to help illustrate a theme, I share a personal anecdote about myself or others. So he's basically, my interpretation of that's him IDing types of allegory he uses, personal anecdotes and historical fictional flair to kind of jazz it up and insert his clues.
I think the best and most simplistic way to answer that question is in the form of the quote by T.S. Eliot, which everyone from the chase world knows: we shall not cease from our exploration, and the end of all exploring will be able to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. So even though you're there, you don't understand why you're there until you've explored, meaning you've gone through the entire book, you've read it a multitude of different ways and different interpretations. And then what you've learned along the way is going to give you the knowledge you need to understand what to look for. And you're going to see that place again for the first time.
Precisely.
What's an example of something where you thought it was a thread or an allegory, like you were talking about? Just so we can get an idea of the way you guys are thinking about this. But you can tell us now because you think it wasn't actually one of the solutions.
Okay, I could do one. When I first learned about TTI and he released the very first article and it was alluding to Dungeons and Dragons, my little nerd heart was so happy. And we had nothing. We just had the article. So I came under the interpretation and impression that because he's a dungeon master, his methodology for the Dragon's Hoard, aka the Lion's Share, is that you have to break down the different worlds from the Forgotten Realms, and that fantasy map from D&D is going to mirror an actual real location out of the 48 states. So I spent about 2 weeks. We had so much time to kill. I just kept narrowing things down, figuring different allegories out through that introspect. And I narrowed it down to a specific location. And it's not until you understand the quote from T.S. Eliot where you really know where to look.
And it's funny because even before Indy and I were on a team, we were both on a lot of the same threads with D&D.
So you've been working on this for a few months now. Let me ask you, how many hours a week roughly do you spend on this treasure inside?
It depends on who in the group, or not in the group per se, who in the community states they don't think I have the capabilities of actually solving it. So a little word of the wise, never tell a Capricorn they can't do something because they'll end up doing it half the time.
So it sounds like you're spending a lot of time. A lot of time researching this. How about you, Triscuit, as well? How much time are you spending?
It's hard to say. So I do have a lot of things that I do outside of this. Work included, right? And so it makes it difficult to balance the time.
It's really funny though, because sometimes we'll be on tangents, right? Like, so he won't be in the right mindset or headspace when I'm like going on a tangent, and he calls it Spitfire, right? I just call him, I start going, and I'm just like saying all these things and connecting all these different, I'm just connecting the thread, right? And he's just like, whoa. And sometime through that conversation, I'll mention something, it goes right over his head, and he does the same over to me. I'm like, what? I don't know what you said. And then the next day I'll call him, be like, oh my God, I figured this out. And he's like, I literally just said that yesterday. And then vice versa. So like, it's kind of funny, but once we get a mental break and then we start to see a different perspective again, we're on the same page. But it's really funny because we kind of don't realize we're talking about the same thing until like a day later.
Well, I like to say on this show, one of my catchphrases is down with normies, because everyone who does this type of stuff is not normal in a very nice way. And that's why I like meeting all these different people who are not normal, very, I would say maybe eccentric, but brilliant and all sorts of adjectives. So I'd like to understand from your perspective, when you're working on these things, how does that interface with your normal world? Is there co-workers, family that see what you're doing and think it's very crazy, or everyone thinks it's really great and cool? How's the rest of the world reacting to you searching for treasure?
I mean, I'm not normal. So let's say if someone wants to go out to a bar and hang out with friends and meet someone at a bar, they normally will have a beer and have a conversation about work and life. I go into a deep dive story about, the lost city of gold and how it pertains to the chess motif of Forrest Fenn and how it actually connected to, the Grolier Codex, which is linked to Douglas Preston's story that he wrote about Forrest Fenn. So it's like, you see me in a crowd and I'm just going to give you an adventure like you're living in a Dan Brown novel.
Right.
So try and date with that type of perspective.
Triscuit, how about you? How do you interface this with your normal world?
I'm actually the opposite. I don't tell anyone about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I don't know why exactly. I think it's more of I don't want someone to have a preconceived judgment on my character because of what it entails, right? And frankly, I don't want to hear people's advice either. If they have opinions about whether or not I should be getting involved in things like this, right?
Yes.
I just don't want to hear it because I don't care.
Yes.
It doesn't affect me, so I never bring it up to anyone.
You're forgetting I've seen your dating profile.
Hey now.
I saw the Indiana
Hey,
Jones captain.
It's written in allegory, okay?
But it sounds like you guys are having a lot of fun with it. Has it been kind of fun all along, or kind of spurts of not boredom, but like low energy, and then hitting on something which gets you really excited, blowing up each other's phone? How's it been for you from an excitement standpoint?
Just like that, a roller coaster.
So days and days of not much, and then all of a sudden a spike of excitement.
Yep.
We talked Triscuit earlier. You are in the tech world. What is it that you do for work, Indy?
Oh, me? You're never going to believe it. I'm a recruiter for the mortgage realm.
Right.
For the what?
For mortgage. I'm a mortgage recruiter.
Oh, okay. I thought you said something realm, and I was like, oh man, we just went way nerder than I ever thought we were going to go.
No, that's what's funny. I am a diehard nerd, and I think that's why Triscuit and I get along so well, because even though he's like science and numbers and geographical based, I'm like just a nerd, just like him. But I did say realm. I said mortgage realm. I mean, what's funny is when I talk about, on my profile or whatever, I'll say, mortgage recruiter by day, treasure hunter by night. And when I got into the chase realm, I not only discovered I have a love of treasure hunting and solving puzzles, but I also love creating them. So for a few years back in I want to say 2020 to 2023, I was doing my own treasure hunts. So because I have that blueprint of how to create a treasure hunt, not only do I know how to find clues for the way in which to solve, but I also think I know how to backdoor a certain treasure hunt by creative treasure hunting standpoints.
Covering your leads. What was that about, Triscuit?
Learning to know how to search for information is very vital here. So learning how to use keyword searches. The Google search bar, for example, lets you do a lot of interesting things like exclude certain websites or exclude certain information, or ensure that anything that you're looking up absolutely includes a specific word. And you can look up advanced searching techniques, and they will just be on the internet for you to use. And it makes the research process so much easier.
Is there anything particular you guys were thinking we could talk about tonight that we haven't talked about so far?
I would just say, don't have a hive mind when everyone else is out in California digging for gold. Be the salesman that's selling the shovels.
Blaze your own path. 100%.
I would say challenging everything, because in my personal opinion, the reason why we have not historically been able to discover or recover lost history is exactly that: confirmation bias. You have people that have gone to universities, they have PhDs, they're scientists, all these different, curriculars and, different achievements, but they're the ones shooting down other ideas. And they're saying, well, my idea trumps your idea because I have a PhD. When it doesn't matter if you went to school, if you graduated, it all matters on perspective and how you interpret an idea. If you look at the different concepts of mythology, it's all reiterating the same thing. It all talks about the same thing, but it's all from different cultures, religions, timelines, and it's all different perspectives. So just because someone with a PhD tells you you're dumb, that's not going to work, does not mean it's not going to work. It means challenge it. Try to think outside the box and look at it in a way that's never been looked at before.
I always say that some of the best answers come from the most unlikely places.
Definitely agree.
Yeah, I'm basically in full agreement that, never discount yourself on anything, right? I think that's one of the core messages that John is trying to teach as well. He says not to give up and to just keep at it, have grit.
Okay, sounds good. Well, good luck with everything, and we'll speak to you soon.
You too.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Well, that was really good talking to Indy and Triscuit. I was excited to hear from them, and they've got some very intellectual theories.
I know. Again, like I've said this a few weeks in a row, it's a little intimidating. You've got the mountain men of Diego and Joe who are here. You've got the brains behind the whole operation here with Triscuit and Indy. They got a lot going on, but I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to stick with my confidence that I'm going to think outside of the box and think of something that no one else has thought of.
Yeah, we're just Team Sasquatch over here, plugging our way through.
So that was a pretty long conversation with Indy and Triscuit, so we don't have a lot of time for other things this week, although we will be back next week. There's a lot more theories I want to go through that people have been throwing up over the internet, and we'll try and do a recap then. All right, well, everyone have a good week. We will be back next week, and look forward to speaking to you then.
Bye, everyone!